And welcome everybody to the series finale of Red Maryland Radio, coming to you from the Red Maryland Command Bunker, the soon-to-be retired Red Maryland Command Bunker. I am Brian Gervais. Well, I mean, it's not going to be the Red Maryland anything here soon.
Okay, well, that's true.
Yeah. And joining me from the Jim Plunkett studio, the happiest man in America, Greg Klein.
Good to be here. The Jim Plunkett studio is soon to be converted into a law office, apparently.
A full-time law office.
According to some George Soros left-wing blogs.
It's going to be one of those shows, isn't it?
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. We've made it. This is it. We've made it.
We have made it.
Yes. We're going to talk about the election results from this past week.
Yes.
Because that's one of the reasons that we ended when we ended. And by the way, that was a smart decision on our part, because obviously you guys really wanted what we were putting out. We'll talk more about that later. And then we will go through, looking back, looking forward, pulling the curtain back, tearing the curtain down, doing whatever we're doing. Brian and I both wrote kind of our final pieces.
Wordy.
Verbose.
Very verbose.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what we said. If there was anything we didn't say, obviously not all of you read it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the feedback we've gotten. Overwhelmingly positive, which makes us very uncomfortable. But we got some hate, and we'll share that too, because we enjoy that. And maybe we'll even correct some people's English.
Well, Greg, people do judge you by the words you use.
It's true. I've heard that. I've heard that in the past. And they're right to judge you. But again, at the end of the day, it wasn't matter. So, Brian, let's start with the election results. We finally had the primary election, which just could not have gone any better. We foresaw any problems with this.
Yeah.
And I'll set it up for you, please.
Well, as everybody knows at this point, we had the election on Tuesday, and it was a mail-in election for the most part.
Right.
And that went south pretty much a while ago, when it turned out that a lot of voters, particularly in Baltimore City, had not gotten ballots. And why not? They have a mayor's election in Baltimore City. They have one every 4 years.
Yeah.
Why get this one right?
Exactly.
Particularly when the primary is the de facto general election. And here we are.
Yeah.
2 days later.
Right.
And I believe the last number I saw was 70,000 missing votes. Awesome. That's really what you want. 70,000 missing votes in a city of 600,000 people. That's confidence. I
even for Baltimore, this is the thing I love about life. And now forgive me for being a bit grandiose on our final show. But the thing I love about life is whenever you think things can't get any worse, people always find a way to dig deeper and be worse.
Particularly with the Maryland Democrats.
Yeah, and Baltimore City, you've done it. I mean, the mid 19th century, pug uglies and the tub thumpers are the only thing that would rival the complete, absolute, chaotic, rampant corruption in the city elections. And the results, I mean, as we understand them now, as Brian points out, who knows who actually won this thing, though we have a pretty good idea. And Brian, when we talked about would we know who won, we have a pretty good idea, though, as Brian points out, there's lots of things missing. Vote totals that were put up in the middle of the day, then they were taken down, and then the line, then people.
And then you had precincts that were reporting like a couple hundred elections, and an incumbent was losing by like 80%, and just a lot of just absolute sheer incompetence up and down the line. And look, I don't know if this was the Baltimore City Board of Elections or the State Board of Elections. There's been a lot of discussion in recent days about Linda Lamone, that we have talked about extensively over our run here. And we have talked extensively about the fact, for those of you who don't remember, way back in 2005, Bob Ehrlich had 4 votes on the State Board of Elections. It takes 4 votes. There are 3 3 members of the governor's party and 2 members of the leading opposition party on the state board of elections. It took 4 votes to eliminate the position to change the director of elections for the state of Maryland. And Mike Miller pushed through emergency legislation to make it a unanimous vote, which literally saved Linda Lamone's job. And it's basically been a sinecure for her ever since. She basically cannot be fired.
Yeah.
And now there seems to be a lot of pressure, finally, from Democrats. I know Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford has asked for her to go. I've seen some Democrats start asking for her replacement. Of course, many of them completely unaware it's the Democrats' fault that it needed to that it happened.
Well, it's not part of the talking point.
Oh, of course not.
And the reality is the reason that she's getting the calls from Democrats is because she screwed up a big Democratic primary. let's not kid ourselves. You know, I think some of that's going to go away come the fall. Now there's going to be some, there's going to be some harumphing and trying to figure out what happens. I guess the question is, number one, we cannot have a mail-in predominant. We can't have an election set up the way this one was done come November. It doesn't work. It won't work this fall. We have an existing very, very liberal in allowing people to vote absentee system. We have early voting. Obviously, we're not going to talk a lot about COVID, but obviously people aren't worried about COVID anymore, or seem to not be, because everybody's moving forward to opening up. You got to think by November things will be opened up, at least to allow voting to go forward. We got to do something different, because this is, and I'm sure as the days go along, we'll find out more, was a huge disaster. I mean, it was just, this isn't the way to run an airline and run an election. And
don't forget, there was other weird stuff going on before all of this. You had the ballots that were missing. Baltimore City moved a ballot box at like 5 p.m. the day before the election. Now, part of that was concerns about the protests downtown. I understand some of that. But, I mean, you just had all these ballots missing. People were told they couldn't vote provisional ballots. It just seemed to be the Lord of the Flies. The problem here is the fact that many states, Washington State's one of these states. Washington State has been doing all mail elections for years. Okay. They don't have these problems. For one reason, the Secretary of State in Washington who oversees elections is an elected position, and they need to protect their phony baloney jobs. But they also had time to implement a system over time. I think the biggest concern I always had was that we were going from the regular election procedures that we had, and we basically just had to go full guns a-blazing into this all-mail election with not nearly enough lead time, with not nearly enough preparation time, with not nearly enough thinking about how this was actually going to be administered. Partially, that's the governor's fault. I'll acknowledge that. But at the same time, this is not news that the ability, I mean, for years, people have been able to have requests of absentee ballot in Maryland, no-fault absentee voting. It has always been possible that Maryland has an all-mail election if everybody just requests an absentee ballot. You would think that somebody would have realized that, and that there would be some sort of capability to scale up in case there was a demand for extra absentee ballots. And apparently that scalability was just never there.
Well, but other counties seem to get it, seem to make it work. You talked about, is it the state versus, I think there's lots of blame to go around. But clearly, we talked about this before. Clearly, the Baltimore City Board of Elections is terribly run. They were the ones who couldn't get the ballots there on time. They were the ones who were having all these problems. And of course, we had places open for people to vote, and we had walk-up voting that with lines so long that they kept the polls open late too.
For hours.
For hours, so we didn't get results right away, which is insane. And of course, you have to think, especially in the city. Look. There are races, and I don't know how much we want to get in the results. You guys can find out the results. We'll talk about a couple of them, but the most consequential primaries were in the city of Baltimore, which by the way is a big part of the problem. At the end of the day, the reason the city runs like crap, and you get people like Sheila Dixon being elected with
presumably reelected,
presumably going to be the next mayor with 30% of the Democratic vote is because you have a one-party system.
Correct.
And you have a politics that's not built on any sort of. You talked about Washington State having an elected secretaries. Not only is it that, but Washington State has very competitive statewide elections too.
And Washington State actually has a system similar to what California and Louisiana do. They actually have everybody goes in the pot, and the top two candidates, regardless of party, go on to the general election.
Well, that's a different issue.
But in an instance like Baltimore, they'd be a lot better off with that, because then at least all the voters would have to pick between one Democrat or another in the general election. It's not the best solution, but it's a hell of a lot better than having Sheila Dixon coming in as mayor again. I mean, seriously, as you point out, Ray, 70% of the electorate rejected the convict.
Right.
And she's still going to get to be mayor.
Well, presumably they'll vote for her come November, which is the rub. Okay, there may be an independent candidate or something like that, but at some point, voters in the city are going to affirm her. And the essential problem is that you have a one-party system there. That's the problem. And look, I know people get angry when we talk about the voters deserve what they get because they keep voting it in. But the reality is, at the end of the day, that is what's happening. You can say, well, 70% of Democrats didn't vote for her. There were close races in other places, but then there are general elections. And
they're still going to vote Democrat anyway. Right.
I mean, if you act as though the one-party system is the only system you have, and you ignore, you just completely rule out the possibility of having a competitive two-party system or having competitive general election campaigns, then you're going to get a corrupt city that's run by people who get into office in very corrupt ways, because that's the system you've created and that you've, with your voting patterns, have reinforced. So,
and look, it's theoretically possible that in the general election, that Bob Wallace, who as we've mentioned before, is running as an independent, it's theoretically possible he does well running against Sheila Dixon. Okay, it's theoretically possible.
Well, if
Shannon Wright ain't going to beat Sheila Dixon, okay,
well,
let's be clear.
We can talk about the weaknesses of the Republican candidates, and I agree with you. But the point is, if the citizens of Baltimore want something different, they have to change. You can't have one party rule.
Yeah, we can't force it on them.
And by the way, saying just have the top two, have a jungle primary, is only reinforcing one party rule. That's why I'm not a fan of it, because that's all that it does. You're only reinforcing one party rule. That's the problem in the city. If you have, and you're not going to fix it, you're not going to get accountability if at the end of the day, elected officials aren't elected or not elected based on the actual job performance they do. That's the problem. If it's being beholden to the power brokers and the money bundlers and the kingmakers within their own party in a closed, fairly low turnout primary election, that's the people you're going to get. And it is on the voters at that point to do something about it. So
play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Okay, wow.
I mean, it's what it is.
This is the kind of insightful commentary you're going to get from the Duck Pen Duck Out.
But I mean, it goes to your point, though. I mean, you can't keep doing the same things over. I mentioned this in my Capital column. You can't elect the same bunch of losers and think that change is going to happen. Even if, look at the city comptroller race, okay? Yeah, Joan Pratt was city comptroller for 24 odd some years. It looks like she's going to lose, but she's going to be replaced by just another Democratic incumbent who's been on the city council for, a decade at least. It's not a change. It's just reshuffling the deck chairs. And, Baltimore, we've talked, and I think this is one of the biggest frustrations as we kind of wrap up, is that Baltimore is actually worse off today than it was when we started this.
I don't know that that's a frustration. We've acknowledged. I think there are a lot of people in the city who recognize that as well. But and you look at big cities, it's the same problem. This is the same basic problem.
Oh, no, yeah, in cities across the country, you're right.
You have a lack of competitive politics. And when I say competitive politics, I'm talking about general elections. And whether it's an independent running or a third party, whatever, you don't have competitive general elections. And you have primary elections, and this is true for all parties, that are dominated by ideology and name recognition and raising money, which is a lot of the story of who won and who lost in these primaries. It's politics 101. That's the system that you have. If you want it to change, you have to vote differently. Maybe if you have an independent who comes in and gets a large percentage of the vote or gets elected, or a Republican that gets a shocking number of votes, maybe that can have some sort of effect, but it won't. And if you get elected by people who bundle you, you're going to be beholden to those kingmakers to put people into offices and use your patronage to pay those things back. So you're going to get people who are running city agencies who aren't there because of their competence and don't keep their jobs because of their ability to do job well, but because of who they're connected to. And you get crappy results in city services.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's not rocket science. We all know what the problem is, but fixing it's going to require something fundamental that voters in the city ultimately are going to have to do.
Let's talk about some of the other races. I don't want to get stuck on Baltimore too far. I do want to mention here at Anne Arundel County, Corinne Frank, who we endorsed, won her primary. Unfortunately, Scott Schaefer, who we also endorsed, did not. So
Scott was a tougher race for him.
It was a tougher district, 5 people running. So it sucks. Scott would have been a great candidate, and
he'd have been a great member of it.
Yeah, he would have been fantastic. He's the kind of leadership we need, but it's not the leadership we're going to get at this point. So,
hey, but I think to your point, for those, and this is when we talk about what we've accomplished at Red Maryland, one of our biggest accomplishments is getting an elected school board here in Anne Arundel County.
Yes.
And one of the things people used to say was, you're not going to get decent candidates to run. And I think people like Scott Schaefer and Corinne Frank, win, lose, or draw, show definitively that you will get good people to run.
Yes.
And that people care about this community. So I thank both of them for showing that. And I think Corinne will do a great job. I look forward to what she does on the Board of Education.
And I look forward to voting for her this fall, because she obviously there's the general election coming. So let's look at some of the congressional races. Neil Parrott, we endorsed, one easily. That wasn't a surprise to anybody.
Congratulations to Neil. It's going to be a tough race. We support him wholeheartedly. He'd be a fantastic congressman. But again, you got gerrymandering and you got the national headwinds, and it's going to be a tough race. Yeah,
if you look at the first district, Andy Harris got about 81% of the vote. Not a surprise.
No.
Jorge Delgado's a good guy. Again, another guy who probably got, first off, you're running against an incumbent with no name ID. You're already behind the 8 ball.
Right.
Then you get a pandemic, and it's pretty much game over at that point.
And we've just to say on that point, we've interviewed Jorge. He's a nice guy. He's been supportive, as of course the congressman had. Congressman. We probably haven't given enough credit in a lot of things, but he's been the big hit of both of our leadership conferences. He's been very supportive of us here at Red Maryland, and I think he represents his district extremely well.
His district is very happy with him.
Yeah. So, I guess the question I have for just to throw it out there, does Jorge Delgado accomplish something? Would he have been better off running for something else, for waiting in line? Does doing this accomplish? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But it's I'd like to see, because the guy's obviously very bright and very talented, and he has some ability. I'd like to see that channeled into something that could ultimately be more successful than trying to knock off an incumbent congressman in a party primary.
One of the interesting things that we thought was going to happen, but looks like it might not, Greg, is that for a long time coming, the leader for the Democratic primary was Allison Galbraith, who had dropped out of the race 2 months ago.
Right.
But she's actually now fallen behind Mia Mason, who was a Green Party candidate for something last year. She's a transgender former Marine, I think it was. I'm not sure how well that's going to play in the general election on the Eastern Shore.
I think that's solid. No problem. That's a winner all the way.
The second congressional district, the Republican primary, is
before you go on, whether she ends up being the nominee or not, the fact that you have a major party in a congressional district nominating somebody who dropped out 2 weeks tells you that voters don't have very much information. And whoever this woman was obviously someone people knew the name somehow.
Yeah, she had run last time. She had name ID
last time. So, again, this is our last show. So I'm going to say this and repeat this to you candidates out there. Name recognition in primaries. Job number one. However you do it. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but that's job number one. It's not the issues. It's not the other guy ducked the debates or went to the debates. Your YouTube videos that no one's watching are not going to get you in there. You have to get your name out there. You lose because people don't know who you are, period.
Done. Yeah. It'll be interesting, though, by the way, to see Democrats, because if you remember, Greg, when Dan Bongino was the Republican nominee for Congress in Maryland, back when he thought Maryland was still worth fighting for, he got a lot of flack because he was running in a Western Maryland district and living in Severna Park. Mia Mason lives in Frederick and is running on the Eastern Shore, so I'm sure the Democrats will just gloss over that and just ignore that little tidbit. In the general election.
I always remember what Dan told us during the campaign as he polled that issue, because that was an issue that was raised against him. And he said, number one, people overwhelmingly say they don't want to vote for somebody who doesn't live in the district. And question two was nobody could say what district they lived in or what district the candidate lived in. So it's one of the perverse byproducts of gerrymandering is that people don't put those geographic dots together.
And it's also one of those inside baseball things too, that people who pay attention are into, but people who actually live in the district and vote could not care less about, for the most part.
I think they care, but they just don't know. I mean,
well, there's that too. It's a lack of information.
If you lived in the 6th district, would you know for certain that Severna Park's not in it? I mean, it could be in Maryland. That's what's so stupid about the way we draw. And I understand why we do what we do, why it's being done the way that's being done. But it's one of the perverse side effects is that you can get somebody who doesn't live in the district, like Kim Klacik, and people don't know or care.
Yeah. So in the 2nd congressional district, the Republican primary, there's a 7% difference between 1st place and 6th place. Okay. Think about that for a second. Johnny Ray Salling is ahead right now. I'm not going to say he won yet, but Johnny Ray Salling had 19.6% at the moment.
Right.
Rick Impalaria, for reasons that are just mind-numbing,
name recognition,
got 17% of the vote.
He's a 3-4 term delegate from parts of that district. That's
whatever. Tim Fazenbaker got 15.7% of the vote.
Right.
Genevieve Morris got 15.5% of the vote. Jim Simpson got 15% of the vote. And then our good close personal friend Scott Collier got 12% of the vote. And then Blaine Taylor came in the caboose, 5.3% of the vote. He definitely had he definitely had name recognition you probably don't want. I'm sure he sent Jake Mahorovic an email about it.
Now that was inside. I don't know what you're talking about there. That's the kind of stuff you can look forward to at the Duck
Tank. Look, ultimately it's probably not going to matter because the district is, because the district is gerrymandered for Dutch Ruppersberger. But, I can only think there have got to be things that could have happened that could have actually swung that. Tim Fazenbaker doing all these OAN hits and talking to all these other people instead of calling the voters the weekend before the election. That's the kind of thing that might make a difference.
Or maybe they're all watching OAN and they saw him.
Maybe they are. I don't know.
I have
to think that the average voter who's making a decision in the 2nd congressional district doesn't even know what OAN is.
Well, I think,
I'm not being mean about it. I'm just being honest.
I'm saying that would definitely be true, generally speaking. But if you're talking about Republican primary voters, that percentage is probably a little higher. Fair enough. Or that there's an audience. But again, it's name recognition. It's TV. Would he been able to make enough calls to get, but those are the kinds of things candidates ought to be thinking about and making those kind of decisions on. And it's a close race. But again, it looks like, we'll see what the final result is, that the people with the highest name recognition, because they've run before, because they've been elected there, are getting the most votes. And that's, again, it is a science, but it's not rocket science. It's name recognition, people. So you can make another video that, exposes after the election, the guys who didn't, want to do the debates and they're ducking everybody.
Yeah.
Collier, but I don't think that's why you lost.
No. The other congressional districts.
By the way, just to finish, if they ducked the debate and won, they're the smarter ones. You see?
Funny how that works out that way. Yeah. None of the other congressional districts, even in the Republican primary, really kind of was all that particularly close. I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised in the 5th congressional district that the race was actually a 2-candidate race. I kind of thought it was going to be a little more jumbled up. I thought our friend Lee Havis was going to have a little more do a little better than he did. I was a little surprised by that. But Chris Palombi won that race over Doug Sayers, 36, called 36-30. And that's really it. The only other elections of any note, of any coverage that we saw, it was Danielle Hornberger, who just blew the incumbent Cecil County executive Alan McCarthy completely out of the water.
And we had the judicial elections where the sitting judges everywhere did very, very well, including they all won an annual. Congratulations. I supported all of them wholeheartedly. So just to be clear on the record, if any of them are watching, great. Good job. Awesome.
I'm still going to write you in the general election.
No, please don't do that.
Okay. Well, you ain't the boss of me.
That's true. That's true.
I think that's been clear over the last 13
I thought
years.
I thought that race here in Anne Arundel County would be a little close.
No, I agree.
I'd be curious to see if we didn't have COVID-19 and the restrictions and you could have more kind of retail politics, whether that would have made a difference. But hey, look, the judges worked hard and they had, came together and the bar supported them and everybody did whatever they do and those kinds of things. I think some of them were probably happier, if I'm being real, were happier that they couldn't go out to go to parades and shake hands and do all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, because
like they dodged a bullet a little bit. Because I know that there are a lot of people, and I've said this before, who apply for those jobs or don't apply for those jobs because they don't want to run for public office. It's a 15-year friggin' term, and you're an incumbent, and you get to run with the support of all the I would love to run in a race like that. Are you kidding me? That would be a dream race to be in. But people want to be judged, but they don't want to do that. So I'm glad it worked out for them, and now they don't have to degrade themselves by intermixing with the hoi polloi between now and November. So,
I mean, look, there still is an election. Theoretically, a candidate could still petition the ballot or run a write-in campaign. So, I mean, they're not technically out of the woods yet. But
there you go.
All right, I think we've kind of said all we need to say about the elections. So now
congratulations to everybody who won, and those who didn't.
And I know Don Murphy's watching, so I will reiterate one of his rules. If you didn't make the concession call, make the call.
Right. And if you won, take the call and be gracious when you do.
Yeah. Really, it just comes back to the rule of life. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a jerk. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you've run multiple times and lost again, maybe try to learn something from it, Maybe now's the time you realize just posting in Facebook groups your long screeds about how everybody's corrupt except you isn't going to get you elected.
William Donald Schaefer said there's three times. Okay.
Right.
If you lose 3 times in a row, it's time for you to hit the streets and maybe do something else with your phony baloney life.
That's why I will never run again, because I've got 2. And if I do it again, I'll be a perennial.
I mean, you really don't have to. I don't count the chairman's race.
I wish and now I'm going to be real here, and this is for Don Murphy because he loves this kind of crap.
Yeah,
I've lived a long life.
Casting for Don now.
I've had setbacks. I've had disappointments. I've had great successes. Whatever, ups and downs in life. There's only if you said, Greg, I'm going to give you the DeLorean to use. You can go to one place at one time and use it. I would not hesitate. I would go back to that meeting we had at Three Rivers. I would run in there and grab Two Rivers. Sorry,
Jimmy's watching. Get his damn restaurant name.
Two Rivers restaurant with all these people trying to convince me to run. I would have gone in there, grabbed my past self, and ripped me out of there and said, "Do not do this." And I absolutely, without question, You know, everything else I've ever done that was, running for delegate, fine. That was a great experience compared to running for state party. I would never have done that. It's the biggest single regret of my life.
And look on the bright side, it wasn't nearly
Two Rivers. Sorry, Jimmy. I apologize.
Yeah, I got you, Jimmy.
Barn Grove.
Pasadena, Maryland. Outdoor seating now open temporarily. Got to bill Jimmy for that one.
Drinks are on Jimmy.
Drinks are always on Jimmy. So I completely lost my train of thought, which is pretty good for the part. That's par for the course, really. So let's talk about this. We've got 13 years of Red Maryland. Technically speaking, we did not make 13 years.
We're cheating. Who cares? Who cares? We're cheating a little bit. Who cares?
You're right. We can do what we want. As I said in my piece, and Greg, I'll say a couple things, and then I'll turn it over to you.
The floor is yours.
You know, this was kind of the first part of my piece. And if you've read my entire piece at redmaryland.com, God bless you, because it is 5,000 words long. Longest thing I think I've ever written. And if you had told me 13 years ago that everything that has happened with Red Maryland, with the Maryland Republican Party, with the state, would have happened, I would have told you, you are such an optimistic person. Because look, there were a lot of people at the time, one of them being Bob Ehrlich, who said we're never going to elect a Republican governor again the rest of their lives. And, we went through a lot. We went through the entire O'Malley administration, basically. I mean, basically, Red Maryland was almost a reaction to Bob Ehrlich losing to Martin O'Malley and a reaction to the first couple months of the O'Malley administration. And over that time, we broke news stories. We covered inside baseball. I don't think anybody has ever provided the the background information, kind of the nuts and bolts information. Nobody has covered the Maryland Republican Party and its machinations like we have, and I don't think anybody ever will again, quite frankly.
We'll send an email about us doing that later on. Go ahead.
And and just everything that has happened since then. The governor's race, the Baltimore Sun, the Governor Hogan winning, the podcast network. I mean, again, I mentioned in the piece, and I know I'm jumping all over the place here, and I'm sure that I'm sure that we'll come back to some of it, along the way. We were years ahead of our time on creating a podcast network. Nobody was doing that in 2011, and we were putting out 5-6 shows a week, including some of the best podcasts anywhere. Dwayne Keenan's in our comment section that night, and Dwayne Keenan put out the best damn news program in the state of Maryland. I will put that against anything that the radio stations were doing at the time.
Absolutely.
And, we did all that as a team. It wasn't one individual effort. Everybody would think for a while, like, oh, Greg's Red Maryland, or Brian's Red Maryland, or Mark Nugent's Red Maryland. And it really wasn't that way. There were a lot of people. There's a piece going up tonight. The last thing that's ever going to be posted on Red Maryland. It's a bunch of thank yous. And we list all 61
right,
people who were part of Red Maryland.
That's right.
61. It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And every one of them, whether they wrote one post or 500 or 1,000, were part of this.
Yeah.
Some people don't remember they were part of this, Ellen Sauerbrey. But
yeah, they go. Which is fun. Yeah.
But Greg, I'll kind of turn it over to you. I mean, it's like obviously a lot of my consternation with what's going on now, and I think we've been frank about this.
Greg approached consternation in your piece, as I recall.
Greg approached me in February and basically is like, I'm done. Okay. And when he presented that to me, it was Greg's idea to shut it down. And I was very hesitant at first. And then I thought back to all the times over particularly the last 2 or 3 years, where I've picked up the phone and was ready to call Greg and say, fuck it, I'm out. And I was ready to walk away from all of it. Not because of anything Greg had done or any of our friends had done anything like that. But I'm just so tired of what this all has become, not what Red Maryland has become, but what our ecosystem around Red Maryland has become. Greg did a fantastic job writing in his piece about this.
Thank you.
About kind of the just ever creeping nationalization of this. And it was very obvious today. The fact that people read headlines and don't click on links anymore.
Well, one of the things I did, and if you're allowing me to jump in, I will. If not,
go ahead.
One of the things I did was I had that kind of clickbaity title to kind of prove a point, and I mentioned it. What's really funny about that is on Facebook, it has the title, President Trump must be reelected, and then underneath is the first line of the blog post, which says, "Author's note: this post is not really about the title."
Yeah,
that's on Facebook. If you look at the link, it says that. So that you kind of gave away the bit on Facebook itself, and yet there were still people who felt compelled to respond to the title, even when we said, "Hey, look, you understand it's not about that." Even when they had read the piece, still had to respond to the title. That's the world that we live in. That is so absurd, And Brian and I both wrote final pieces. I encourage everybody to read them. I know you all haven't. I encourage you all to read them and we'll end up repeating some of those things, frankly, because we have to if we want people to understand this. I mean, I'm interrupting you, so I'll get back to it.
But yeah, to that point, it just proved the point is that people don't read past the headline. People then argue with you about the headline and acknowledge they never read the piece to start with. And by the way, folks, don't think this is only the liberals. Republicans and conservatives do this too.
Absolutely.
Okay? And the number of times I see these people with their MAGA hats, and this is not Trump criticism. I got plenty of that in my piece, but this is not Trump criticism.
Oh, there's full-blown TDS in your piece.
It's not TDS. It's just the facts.
Okay.
Hey.
Sorry, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Call it like I see them. Is the fact that people don't read past the headline and people just want to argue whatever they want to argue about. And people who have their MAGA hats on, but can't tell you who their county councilman is. And it was like that when we started. It was one of the reasons we all got involved in this in the first place. Why I started writing, why you started writing, why you started the Refuge podcast, why Red Maryland happened in the first place.
Right.
And as you point out, Greg, it's only gotten worse from there. And I think the problem I have, Greg, if you just let me finish here for a second,
please, I'm sorry,
is the fact that they almost wear it like a badge of honor. Like they're happy to be so ignorant about what's going on locally, when that is the most important thing that you can have a part of. Whether it's your city council, or your town council, or your county council, your board of education, that's where the sausage really gets made, and that's where things that impact your daily life. Donald Trump's not going to plow your driveway or your road, and Ben Cardin or Nancy Pelosi is not going to determine the curriculum at your kid's high school. And people they almost embrace the ignorance of not knowing that. Like it's a badge of honor, but they're super patriots because they wear their MAGA hats and want to keep America great again when they can't even keep their backyard great.
Okay. I as I wrote in my piece, I do share a lot of that frustration. Obviously, I have a little different take on it. I think what's great about both Brian's piece and my piece is that if they're both in our voice telling the same story, it's like two books of the gospel. We're kind of telling the same story with different details, and then there's a little different take on what's going on. Yeah, it has gotten worse. I think when we started, we thought people wanted to know more about what was local, but they didn't have the outlet. I think we were optimistic that if we gave it to them, these people who, and by the way, we're talking about people who are engaged in politics, or we're not talking about people who wanted to watch ESPN all day or wanted to play online video games. Those people aren't interested in politics. We're talking about people who were engaged, who shared a similar set of values, who voted a certain way in national elections, who just didn't have the information locally. That's what we wanted to start out doing. And we wanted to do that as well as engage the other side on arguments and try to persuade and be that voice in the marketplace of ideas. And it was, it was very aspirational and whatever. And you're right, it's worse. And I think the fact that we're so tied in trying to reach our audience through social media is awful. It's awful. The media environment in general is awful. All the rewards are for the worst possible things. Those aspirational ideas we had when we started as blogs, those are those are swimming upstream now. Okay. What more and more, what gets rewarded, I won't necessarily say this is what people want, but this is what people respond to, and what gets rewarded in the ways that things get rewarded is owning the other side, short memes and whatever, without a lot of, they don't want to do any type of intellectual rigor. It's taking on the nut picking and taking on the most extreme arguments of the other side as basically straw men, rather than taking on the best arguments and having a real conversation. People don't want to do that.
Nope.
They want to have their, they want to own the libs. It's angry. It's coarse. Our friend Jimmy Braswell, who I love, this guy, he retweeted a tweet from some guy today. It's, 5 F words. I got some guy, I made kind of a joke because I saw that our friend Dan Bongino was on Fox News. Dan Bongino reacts to whatever. And I jokingly said, I bet he was angry because that's a shtick. And somebody responds to me, this guy who thinks he's George Patton or something, responds, aren't you angry? I'm like, you don't understand what I'm saying. Okay. And I'm sure Dan's angry at some level too, sincerely, but he plays it up. It's shtick. It's a TV show. We've made politics entertainment because people increasingly don't want to have the hard work of thinking. It's not that they're not capable of it, but they want it to be entertainment and they want to be reinforced. And increasingly, that's where the audience is that we're trying to reach. And that's where we're trying to reach the audience. And
it's professional wrestling. And look,
I hate that. I
know you do.
I think that is mind-numbingly stupid, and I resent that we have gotten dragged into that. And I think, unfortunately, at times, I think we've succumbed to that temptation.
No, we have. You were critical of me in your piece to a point, and it was fair criticism. I
didn't name you expressly. We're both guilty.
You mentioned me, but I don't dispute that. Is my point. I don't disagree with you that I fell into it. And look, I've made that joke before that if you understand professional wrestling, you understand life. But it sucks when it comes to something we're talking about, real issues, and too often. And look, national politics, again, who gives a shit? It's not going to really affect your day-to-day life. Okay, sorry if that offends you. I'm not sorry, but you know that already. But people, and like you said, Fox News and OAN, and look, it's not just Republicans, okay? It's MSNBC and CNBC. Everybody's got a shtick, and they go on TV and they want to get their shit in, okay? And that's all they care about is get the shit in.
And unlike professional wrestling, which people know is fake and is entertaining.
Not fake, it's scripted.
Okay. It's not real.
It's not real.
There are people who think this is real. And they're rubes, and they're allowing themselves to be that. So if we wanted to be what we set out to be, which was engaging in the best arguments the other side had intellectually, and move a conservative intellectual movement that's focused on state and local politics, okay? Because if you want to do that for national stuff, you got George Will, you got Jonah Goldberg, you got intelligent, you got the Federalist, you got all that kind of stuff. They do it better than we ever could. Pick whoever you want, okay? Even if you want to be a Trump MAGA guy, there are people who are dedicated to that. You don't have intellectual engagement from a conservative perspective on issues here in the state of Maryland and in local politics. You don't. Our friends at MPPI do some of that. There's a few places here or there, but systematically, that's what we wanted Red Maryland to be. And increasingly doing that got harder and harder and less rewarding. And, and I wrote about this in our piece. My phrasing of it, my experience is a little different than Brian's is, but we both came to the same conclusion. So when Brian and I got together in February, and I said, I'm done. This is, the candle's not worth the wax. And I pointed to just kind of the personal revelation of scripture. And I'm like, why are we keeping doing this? It's just vanity to think we're doing anything here. We're chasing after the wind. We're not doing anything. It's not fun anymore. It's taken too much of our time. We've dedicated, I'm 48 years old. I've been doing this for 13 years. You can do the math. I've done this a third of my life almost. Brian, longer or a higher percentage anyway. I'm going to be 60 years old dealing with these idiots on Facebook that we'll talk about, tonight. Just to give you an example, before we go on, we get some knucklehead post from Frederick County Conservative, anonymous, saying the final nail will be driven into the coffin known as Red Maryland. Goodbye and good riddance. The guy can't even use the idiom correctly. The idiom is that the nail's driven in the coffin that we're in, but he's calling us the coffin.
Not a coincidence in this case that idiom and idiom's only one letter away from idiot, Greg.
I don't know how you engage with somebody like that. And I don't, and somebody like that doesn't want to engage. And we got some email, because I do want to show.
Go ahead and pull it up. Yeah.
This kind of stuff. And I hope that if there's anybody listening to this right now who agrees with what we were trying to do, who says, man, I'm really going to miss it because you guys did do that and I'm going to miss that and I wish there was something like that. I hope that in the future, that when you see people like this, you will confront them, engage them, because we've been doing it for 13 years. And I got to tell you, it's not very rewarding. You probably won't, but you should. Okay. So we get an email from, and I'm going to mention names. Why not? They sent it to us with their name. George Gallagher, who's a guy in Annapolis, I think, who ran for alderman, if it's a guy I'm thinking of. Here's what he wrote to us. On the day that we're leaving, you would have succeeded if you didn't keep rejecting input from constitutional conservatives. Your constant inside baseball discussions, to your point, Brian, with no fundamental discusses about taxes and conservative policies doomed your effort.
First off, you have to.
Every phrase in that is wrong, as we'll point out. Number one, May of 2020 was the second biggest month for traffic in the history of Red Maryland. Thank you all for that. Second biggest month in 13 years. Okay. The ratings for this show on Facebook and the podcast are the highest they've ever been. Okay. The conferences that we held were more successful every year. We have more people following us on social media than we've ever had. We are going out on top as far as any metric. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. We didn't fail. We're not failing. Okay. I don't know what input from constitutional conservatives we rejected. I read your email, dude. We've read those comments. We've engaged those people. We went up to Frederick and got harangued by a bunch of crazy gun nuts who think they're Rosa Parks because they bang pots outside of some congressman's house. I don't know what it is we're not doing. Okay. And then we don't have fundamental discussions about taxes, fundamental discusses about taxes or conservative policies. Read our friggin' blog. Go put taxes. I'm ranting. I hope you appreciate this. Go to redmaryland.com, put taxes in the search bar and see how many articles we've done, how many thoughtful, intelligent pieces we've done about conservative policies, the environment, life issues, healthcare, on and on and on, land use, the Second Amendment, on and on and on. We've tracked these things for years.
If you search taxes, Greg, there are, I want you to, 62 pages of articles.
Right. So I don't know where the hell George Gallagher, whoever the hell this guy is, gets off saying we've never discussed taxes in 13 years we've been doing Red Maryland. But this is the kind of bull, and I'm going to be coarse because that's what people want, and it's the only thing people respond to. And unlike Dan Bongino, this is real anger. It's not shtick for ratings because I don't care about that. This is the kind of bullshit we have to deal with on a daily basis by people who are nobodies, who don't have a basic fundamental understanding, going back to our first segment, about how you win elections and achieve electoral success. Okay? These are people who are losers with born to lose tattooed on their forehead and resent the hell out of us for pointing it out to them.
Yeah. That's the real reason that, like, the Frederick Conservative Club posted what they said,
Yeah.
because it's an entire circle jerk of people who've never wanted anything in life. You think that, that's the whole reason they're angry. I mentioned this in my post, is that they got angry with, some of these same people got angry with Greg 4 years ago for pointing out a good news gun story. And some of them actually had the guts to say we should run every gun story through them before we publish it.
In 13
and it's like, who the fuck do you think you are?
Let's not go crazy with it. In 13 years,
just emulating you, Greg.
I know. This is what I'm saying. This is what it brings out. It brings out the worst in people. In 13 years, there was only one time in 13 years, another time, which is a different issue, which is unrelated, which maybe the duck pen we'll talk about later. But only one time that anybody asked us to take down a post. One time. Okay. And that was because I wrote a post just following up on something I said in a podcast about an article in the newspaper, which I block quoted, that said that, good news for Maryland gun owners, that it was a little easier for business owners to get a concealed carry weapons permit. Mm-hmm. Okay. It wasn't just that these people disagreed, but they demanded that we take it down. They demanded that we not even discuss this issue. And it went back and forth and it got really heated. I'm not going to get into all that and relitigate that again. But this is the nonsense that we've had to deal with. We agree with them 100% on the issue.
But it didn't matter.
But it's this kind of this territorialism, this small-mindedness, this myopic view that people have, this kind of irrational unwillingness, almost anti-intellectualism. And I know that I come off to these people, I have to believe I come off to these people as some sort of effete elitist, because, and you know what? Those people aren't going to read a well-written, well-reasoned 300-page blog post, a 300-word blog post.
I'm not going to read a 300-page blog post.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. There you go. 300-word, 500-word blog, but they're not going to read it. They want memes on Facebook, and more, that's the audience that that was where we were getting our growth. And it was, and it's gotten worse over the years. And it's so frustrating to read a guy like that. 13, and I shouldn't hype on it, because we got 10 times as many positive things, people saying, great job, we're going to miss you, I really appreciated what you wrote, blah, blah, blah. But this is still the crap. This guy saying we never wrote about conservative issues or taxes in 13 years? I mean, George Gallagher, you're an idiot. And I got to tell you, I'm glad I don't have to deal with this crap anymore. Okay? Right to the duck pen now. These people who
hang on.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not being, these are the people who run for office, who think they should be in a room. They run for Congress, one of 15 people running for Congress, because they want to be in a room to tell people who would never listen to them in a million years what all their crazy ideas about government are, make no effort to actually win, and waste everybody's time. And all these organizations who are trying to hold these events, which, by the way, even under the most optimistic of circumstances, even in the lowest turnout primary, maybe 1 or 2% of actual voters go to these events. Okay. There's and I know people get mad when I say this. They're so inconsequential to the ultimate outcome of these elections. But people are trying to do the right thing. We've put these things on over the years. We're trying to get information out to voters. We know that the media doesn't cover these races, won't cover these races. That's why we got huge traffic last month.
Yeah.
That's why one of our biggest traffic days of the year was June 4th, the day of the primary. That's why our biggest all-time month was primary June of 2018.
Yeah.
The 2020 election tab is the most viewed page in the history of Red Maryland. Okay, for our failure. And why people have to go to our blog to get that information is just, and can't go to the mdgop.org, by the way. Sorry. Is just maddening. And that there's not any other conservative media who's willing to step in and do that kind of stuff. I wish it was worth it just to do that, but it's not. And you want to know why we're going? It's crap like this.
Yeah,
and when
because
I sat down to talk to Brian, I'm sorry, and I'll give it to you.
No, go ahead.
When I sat down and talked with Brian, yeah, he wanted to go on. He thought about doing it by himself, and I said, you know what? We wanted to do something at Red Maryland. We can't do it anymore. You have an opportunity to do something different. And I think Brian very quickly realized, and I'm not going to speak for Brian, and he wrote about it.
I'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
We came to the same conclusion. So, I'll leave it. I'll say something else later, but I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
No, I mean, you are right, because I did want to keep going, because it's like we are, for many of the reasons you just said, nobody else is doing it. As I wrote in my piece, there were lots of people who wrote about conservative politics. Okay, Mike Schwartz did. He's moved to Delaware. Okay, so it's not his primary beat anymore. Okay. And look, obviously we've had a come and go relationship with Mike over the years. I have no personal animus towards him. But he did it. He was writing it. He was covering it. He was, he called it like he saw it, even if we didn't always necessarily agree with it.
Mike was one of the leading guys at Red Maryland. He chose not to be a part of that because he thought his own thing was the way to go. That's what happened. That was his choice.
Yeah, his choice.
He was bigger than we were.
There have been other ones over the years. I mean, one is still, become a Democratic bootlicking blog now.
We're gonna do.
Sorry, it's just what it is. I'm just telling the truth.
No, I'm not stopping you. I'm just saying. I'm just acknowledging.
I mean, it is what it is. It's like there used to be a vast conservative blogosphere. They've either gone away, become Democrats,
right,
or in the case of some, nobody cared anyway, and they're dead. So, there
are a lot of dead people. There are a lot of people who are critics who are dead now, and we have allies in all of those circumstances.
Every one of them. So, but it's like, even by that point, though, even 5 years ago, it was getting to the point where it was like the second most important blogger was an unemployed guy living in somebody's basement. I mean, come on. That's like bad old days of the internet. Nobody cared enough to do what we were doing. Right. And we are the last of the breed, right or left, quite frankly.
I think that, and this is what I wrote in our piece, what Red Maryland was envisioned, what Red Maryland is as an idea, the world that it doesn't exist. And we were left with the choice of going one or two directions: continue to do what we're doing with diminishing returns. And
also, too, Greg, you also mentioned at the time, I think this is very important to say, because Sam asked, and Sam's a good guy. I'll just read his question verbatim here. He said, I have to ask, though, if both your pieces you note how much change and differences you've made. Is it unreasonable, despite these frustrations continuing, wouldn't make at least small progress? It did. It would. Small progress. As you know, in my piece, I think a lot of that progress it's going to get partially walked back thanks to the president. And kind of the backward step that we've taken as a party. I know Greg probably disagrees with that to an extent, but also
Donald Trump.
But also, Greg mentioned this at the time, and I started to realize it very quickly. There is a certain hamster wheel effect to all of this.
Yeah,
we're talking about redistricting again. We're talking about a massive education plan again. We're talking about Democratic plans to raise taxes again.
Right.
How much can you say? How much? Greg talking about cycling again. Us talking about assisted suicide again. And at some point, it's like, okay, copy, paste, done. I've written the piece.
Yeah, you keep linking back to better pieces you wrote about it over the years, and it just becomes every new piece becomes
because you feel like you have to have some sort of content out there on the issue.
Right.
But you've already written it, like Greg said, you've written it better before.
And there aren't that many people reading it anyway. You know, let's talk about the podcast a little bit, because you touched on it. This was always the part that I love the most, which is why I'm the general manager of the podcast network. This is the part that when I started podcasting, when we talk
Greg
about
was the first. Let's be clear. Greg was the first.
When we talk about being ahead of our time, I'm always reminded of this great, and I've said this before, Brian's heard me say this. There was a great ad on Comedy Central in the late 90s when they were running Jerry. It wasn't the Jerry Stiller. It was the who's this? Jerry Stiller's son, Ben Stiller. The Ben Stiller show. Ben Stiller. They had reruns of the old Ben Stiller show from Fox, and the promo was Ben Stiller in a graveyard digging up these old tapes, saying, you know, they said this was 5 years ahead of its time, and that was 7 years ago. But it's still kind of funny. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about what we did with podcasting. We were years ahead of our time, and you know, time passes by, and now everybody's doing it. And I still think it's pretty darn good. But you know, I did my own podcast in various forms. That was the truest expression of what I thought a great talk radio show could sound like. And it is what it is. And if you enjoyed it and loved it, God bless you. But, you know, I kind of got that out of my system. And, I listen to talk radio all the time. We have friends in talk radio. There's some good talk radio. There's a lot of crap. There's a lot of people who I listen to. You talked about Dwayne earlier. I mean, I know the guys at BAL try to do some good stuff when it comes to that, but gosh darn it, that news hour that Dwayne put out was as good as anything you're going to hear on the radio. And Dwayne was a radio guy who, you know, had a hard time. We benefited from the fact that he wasn't able to do that at a real radio station, which he should have been doing.
Yes. And it goes back to something we've talked about over the years too. And one of the reasons I think we probably went as long with this as we did is the diminishing coverage of state politics. I'm old enough to remember when the Baltimore Sun had 4 or 5 beat reporters covering just the state house, just Annapolis, what was going on there. They got 2 now. I remember when the Capitol had its own beat writer at the state house, and now I think some of that's been subsumed by the Sun because of the ownership changes. You had the Gazette of politics and business had 2 or 3 people. Oh, there's the thunder. All right, now we're gonna have fun. And we're going to have 2 or 3 people covering it. They went out of business. And look, some of that has been somewhat, taken up by the Maryland Reporter, as much issue as I know we have with it. Maryland matters. But as we learned writing for the Sun, the internet is not just... the internet does not have the reach as the Dead Tree edition.
Yeah.
I mean, even my columns even my columns for the Capitol, I get 5 times as much email after the Dead Tree edition hits the streets than I do from just the internet traffic.
Right. And
it's telling.
Yeah, I think that was something that really shocked us as well when we were actually writing for the Dead Tree edition of the Baltimore Sun. And by the way, those were, I said it in my piece, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Those dozen or so pieces that the 3 of us wrote were the best 12 pieces that we've ever written as Red Maryland. I'll stack them up against anything. Every single one of them was legendary. And, people, you still go back to them. Having it in, that was in a lot of ways for the ideal that Red Maryland had, that was really a zenith for us. And in fact, it was so influential that, they had to find a reason to get rid of us.
Yeah.
And they've never replaced us. They occasionally they'll let Bob Ehrlich put a piece, or they have Jonah Goldberg's column or something like that. But every week having local conservatives talking about state and local politics from a conservative perspective, that has not existed, will never exist in the Baltimore Sun. And, I think that was what we tried to do. But again, that was writing. Those were, 750 word columns that were well written, thoroughly fact checked, and people read them because they were actually. But you're right to your point. It's hard for us being an internet entity with essentially no budget. We should remind people we didn't make any money doing this.
Yeah, let's be honest here, okay? The only time we got,
but we can't reach those people who only read the newspaper in its dead tree edition. We don't have a way of reaching those people with what we do.
The only time we ever made, the only money that we had as income was again what Brian and Greg, for the most part, bought. I mean, all this equipment, Greg bought. We had income from the ads on the website. Now, yeah, I know people really got annoyed with the ads. I'll never forget. There was a story about just to show you how stupid people are. The late Joe Steffen, who of course is deader than a doornail and nobody misses him, was complaining once about the ads on our website and about how he was getting erectile dysfunction ads, completely ignorant of the fact that those ads were based on his internet search history.
Right. We didn't pick the ads. He was trying.
Yeah, we didn't pick the ads.
We were, and the point is that was our relationship with Liberty Alliance. They basically paid. We didn't have any hosting cost, and they put together a pretty good website. And look, you can have the ad blocker, and it worked okay. I understand people complained about it, and we made a little bit of money. It wasn't a lot of money.
It was enough to keep the lights on as far as like the website goes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it did do that, and they maintained the site for us when we had problems. We had somebody and we didn't have to pay somebody to do that, which for us it was a win-win-win.
And it looked a hell of a sight better than the old Blogspot site, which is just obviously something that works, but
those are still great guys, because when we said, hey, we're shutting down because our contract with them says you got to put something up every day, they said, that's fine. We'll leave it up for a while. If you change your mind, you can come back. And the fact is, we just gave them our biggest month, our second biggest month ever.
Yeah.
So, but again, being the internet thing, we can't reach that audience. So the way that we're trying to reach on is go through social media, to go through that kind of stuff. And again, I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but it's, I encourage everybody who wants to understand why we came to the decision that we came to read what we wrote. That the answer is there. But to finish up on the podcast, we were ahead of our time. Things have come around. Things have taken off. I'm very proud of what we did. We have nearly 2,000 podcasts. The people who were on our podcast, so many incredibly talented people, so much great programming that we had fun. We had really intelligent discussions. We have fantastic interviews. We did a lot of service to candidates. Okay. I'm really proud of what we did with that. Even the most local of local talk radio isn't doing a fraction of what we were doing. And look, there are some folks on the left who have embraced the podcasting thing and are doing very well with it. And people who are, let's not just left, let's say not conservative, who fill some of those gaps. Our friends at the Conduit Street podcast do a great kind of wonky policy kind of thing. They do a great job.
We're into. That's the thing. Yeah. It's like, and I think we like, but a lot of the people who we're trying to reach don't have any time for it.
Right. And I think folks like the Elevate podcast and some of these others talk about issues and have local elected officials on and do those kinds of things. There should be a balance from our side. And I think when Red Maryland and the Red Maryland Network was doing what we were doing, and sometimes I think with that, without going through that whole story because it'd be boring, but sometimes I think we sacrifice quantity for quality.
We did.
Came to that. But again, when it was good, there wasn't anybody better. And again, it wasn't just Brian and I, but it was everybody who was involved. I mean, Jimmy Braswell and his Gang of Fools had a really fun show. Jimmy, he came up with, Christmas Carol spoofs, and they would do table reads of things, and he would try to have some sort of, avant-garde political point. It didn't all work. I didn't understand most of it, but it was a lot of fun and people liked it. And we were able to do it. We had June Smith. June Smith had one of the craziest shows that I've ever heard. It was fantastic.
EBO.
Yeah, her Ebola show was great. And by the way, I encourage you, all that's still going to be there. You can go back and check it out. And we did a show because I wanted people to, because people come along. We still have people liking us and finding us every day. So for a while, we'll be an archive. But go back and listen to a show we did called Red Maryland Presents. Just go to redmaryland.com, put in Red Maryland Presents. And I shared shows and clips of shows, some of the best things we ever did on the network. Go check that out. They're so good. And we did best ofs that were so great. A lot of it is evergreen content. I know from the Conservative Refuge Radio podcast that I did, there's a lot of evergreen content that you can still go back and enjoy. So if you missed it, there's still a lot of stuff there. There's still a lot of great stuff there that I wish. I know we only ever scratched the surface. I know we only ever got the tip of the iceberg, but we did a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, and look, and part of that too, you mentioned it's like the only money that was really coming in was we got the ads from the website. We'd occasionally get people to buy ads during the podcasts and stuff like that. And the leadership conference.
Leadership conference was a big success, but again, we rolled that over into the next one. So
yeah, so
and I think the Patreon, to the point that we're disintegrating because we're such failures. Before we shut it down because we knew we were ending things and we didn't think it was right to take people's money to support something that wasn't going to go on. We were at our height.
Yeah, we actually had somebody who had actually agreed to donate $50 a month.
I think it was like $150, but yeah,
I don't know. It was a lot of money.
And we had people sending us checks occasionally, not huge checks, but very generous things that and again, every penny went back into what we were doing.
Yeah. Either bills that either kind of reimbursing Greg and I for what we had spent or buying new equipment. And don't worry, the equipment's going to go to good use. Okay.
Yeah. Software like what we're doing to do this presentation or ads. We've tried different things ad wise to try to expand. We were able to help. We
had an ad on the radio.
Yeah,
which is insane to me still. We actually had an ad on the radio. I don't know if it did anything. I don't know if anybody came to our website based off it. I'm going to guess no.
I don't know either. Probably the ROI on that probably wasn't. But we got so much free. From this is WGMD we're talking about with Mike Bradley. We got so much free advertising from them by having the segment that I did, which by the way is going to continue. Name is still going to be still to be determined, but also
you guys are having a hard time workshopping that apparently.
There are names that I liked, and there are names I suggested, and there's only so many things you can do, and it's his show, and I'm like, okay, whatever you want to call. But anyway, I'm still going to do that because there were people.
That's the only public Greg you're going to get is WGMD
and my Twitter feed.
And Twitter, yeah. So
pretty much it. Yeah, and otherwise, I'm going to concentrate on the practice of law full time.
I heard you do that occasionally, full time.
Occasionally,
full time. So yeah, it's not like we could just, occasionally we were able to reimburse people. Like we reimbursed Wayne for gas and parking a couple of times. We paid some advertising out for some like central committees and stuff like that. And, it's not like, nobody was rolling in money. That's my favorite part of this is that people, and I know we've talked about it recently, people to this day think, oh, have a member of your staff. There ain't no staff.
You have one of your account executives contact me about advertising.
Yeah. Can we come to your office? There's no office.
Your station. I always love
that's what it was.
Well, no, they would want to come to our office sometimes too. But where's your radio station located? The internet. We had this great setup, which for all of its faults, Blog Talk Radio was a great platform for us because it was so flexible. People could call in and participate. And it was just, if we had an internet connection somewhere, we could do the show.
Yes.
And
sometimes that worked better than others.
Yeah. And it had certain limitations. And we eschewed video, certainly for far too long, but for obvious reasons, eschewed video. And now we're on the Facebook. But again, I look at the Facebook stuff and I know people think we're being too negative, but it is what it is. I look at our friend who we used to have on the show, who was part of our network for a while, whose name I'm blanking on because I'm so old. Help me out,
Rob
Brian.
Carson.
Rob Carson, who's a great, funny guy. Okay. Rob was a real radio guy. He was on MAL. He was doing something in Kansas City. He still does some relief work. He was all in trying to make a living doing essentially what Brian and I are doing right now. Right. And he bought a studio and he had the great setup for years. He was doing this. And he would talk about, hey, let's sell t-shirts together, whatever. We were always kind of hesitant. I mean, we were happy to share his podcast for a while until he didn't make it available for us to share anymore. We were happy to support him. And he's hustling, man. That guy's always hustling, trying to do whatever. And he would tell us, I remember 2 years ago, he would say, oh, I'm on 35 Facebook pages and I'm on, this network on Twitch and I've got 50,000 people or 100,000 people. Well, he didn't make any money doing it.
Yeah, where's the money?
Guy's selling cars for a living right now.
I mean, he's got a show on Newsmax now. I'm assuming he's getting some money from that.
I think that makes $1 million. I think he's a great guy. I think he's very talented. But he did have to go sell cars for a while because this is not a way to make a living. Okay.
You have to catch like lightning in a bottle.
I looked at what this guy
to make this work.
I looked how hard this guy was working with the talent and the investment and the equipment and all of the network, all the things you're supposed to do, and how hard it was for him to do it, even with all the crazy numbers, supposedly. Okay. And he still couldn't pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
And that's the point, folks. There ain't any money in doing this. Maybe there will in the future. Probably somebody in the future will do this. And we'll look back and say, man, if only we had learned. But anyway.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, look, we never got into this for the money, obviously. I love the fact that people think that we're conservative Inc. and, we only have our positions to make money. We never got into this for money. We got into this because we were activists.
Yeah.
And we're pissed off and wanted an outlet and to try to do some good in the world, and good we did.
Right. We wanted to do something different, and we saw a place to take our talents and our passion and what we love doing and fill a niche. And we did that. We did that for 13 years.
And to like kind of give a peek behind the curtain of like what
pull the curtain down.
Thought process. Well, I'm just looking towards the future of like what the duck pin is.
Okay, please.
There's no plan to monetize the duck pin. The only reason I'm even doing the duck pin is that I want to I enjoy writing. I enjoy the catharsis of putting my thoughts out there. I enjoy, talking about things. I don't plan to make a dime off of it because it's a cathartic exercise for me, and it gives me the flexibility to talk about whatever I want to talk about. If I want to talk about state and local politics, I can. If I want to talk about the presidential election, I can. If I want to talk about tacos, I can, because it's not a niche. It's kind of a more of a generalist website. I mean, we have people from outside of Maryland who are going to write for it. We have a college football columnist already signed up. Somebody you all have heard of, by the way. Roll Tide. We've got people from Mark Unkefer's coming with me. Okay, Mark Unkefer is going to join me over there. Okay, so he's coming on board. He great work, and he too will have a little additional flexibility to write about some non-Maryland things. I mean, that's the thing that people didn't understand, is that oftentimes we'd get these negative emails. Well, why aren't you talking about Trump? What's the name of what's our name?
Right.
Yeah. It's not Red Trump. It's not Red America. It's Red Maryland.
Yeah. And on the Trump thing, because unfortunately it's this.
You can't get away from it.
Hole that you can't get away from. There's 1 million people doing that. I mean, there's literally 1 million podcasts doing that, and there's no conservative podcast outside of this one doing what we do. So we didn't want to get caught.
Certainly in Maryland,
right? And Brian and I don't necessarily have the same views on the president, and a lot of people who would listen to this for our conservative views would be alienated by Brian's militant anti-Trump, never Trumpism.
I gave him a chance.
And I never, okay, so let's talk about that. See, like, Brian's perfectly comfortable living, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's do this. I think you're perfectly comfortable living in a world where you're in a cage match and you're fighting everybody. I'm not.
I'd win. Cage matches, everything goes. You can gouge the eyes, and
Yeah, I'm not. I don't
get
want
Riptide Maddox as my tag team partner.
I don't want everybody to hate us. There's plenty of people who hate us in the normal course of things. I didn't need to piss off everybody. So, it's one of the reasons I wanted to keep us focused on this. And as Brian points out, there are a lot of people who've been involved. We view our role in this as we're trustees. Okay. Yeah. I think if we ever got to the point where Red Maryland really was just one person or dominated by one person, we'd wreck it. Whoever it was, doesn't matter who it was. Because it can't be that. It has to be bigger than all of us. And I think that was another reason why, and I wrote in my piece, I feel secure that our legacy can be preserved forever. That's why we're shutting this down rather than going on as one person doing it. And I think if that person, and I think Brian would tell you this as much as I would feel you feel hamstrung by doing what we do. I mean, you mentioned it's one of the reasons you stopped doing the Sunday night show, because you were talking more and more about national stuff, and that wasn't in our whatever. It wasn't because I said, "Oh, well, you can't do that."
I just told Greg one day, it's like, I'm done.
But you realize that we have a mission, and we got to try to stick to it and stay true to, because we do stand on the shoulders of a lot of people, like Mark Nugent, like these guys who've come along. And by the way, I'll just say this very quickly. Mark wanted to be a part of this. He wasn't able to be a part of it. We invited him. I'm very, very sorry that he's not. I wish he was. It's impossible to tell the story of Red Maryland or do something like this without having Mark as part of it. And I'm really, really sad that he's not here.
Yeah. And by the way, you want to talk about like the ideal. I mean, Mark got to work for the Hogan administration and make policy.
Right.
And now he works for Lieutenant Governor. And good Lord willing, maybe he'll work in another administration after this one. Or
get a really high-paying job in the private sector. God bless him. I wish him nothing but success. The guy deserves it. And you know what? As I wrote in my piece, Maryland's gain was Red Maryland's loss, and any of us would have traded it for a second. And Mark was definitely very much, part of that mission of us to be that intellectual engagement, and he did it better than any of us did. I'll say it. Okay. I haven't heard for a while people saying you guys are no good since Nugent left. We heard that for a while. It's been a while since I've heard that. But Mark did that, and he was brilliant at it. And that was a lot of what he brought to the table. We stand on his shoulders. And again, I think if he were here doing this, and it's not as though I've never had a conversation with the guy. We're still friends and we still keep in touch. He wouldn't want to put up with this BS either. I can tell you that right now. He's not a fan. He's not my biggest fan right now because of some criticism that I've had. So I can only imagine how he deal with people like George Gallagher of the world. So,
so let's kind of talk about one thing too. We talked about how we were ahead of our time. We were the first people to do. You were the first person to have a political podcast. We had the first podcast network. We haven't even talked about being on the radio twice, by the way. Our WAMD days. That really got all of this started as far as as far as the podcast. There would be no podcast without Warren Monks giving through Mark the opportunity. To be on, the radio, and also WTHU. They broadcast our show. That was a relationship that did not end very well. And
they wanted us to work with somebody who we weren't willing to work with. I think they regretted that decision, and now they're a radio. Now they're a music station only.
Yeah, they killed the format.
Yeah.
And look, it wasn't even necessarily the fact they wanted us to. The biggest issue that I had, and the biggest reason I said we're out, is I was told something, I was given a promise, and then the promise went back on. And I'll put up with a lot of things. I'll put up with people, pissing me off or whatever. But you don't go back on your word. And when you go back on your word, I ain't got time for you. And I
don't even remember all the details. I know they
I remember that I had the conversation with him. I'm like, this is what this guy did.
Right.
This is what happened. I'm not going to be on a radio station with him. I was given assurances. Okay, well, I didn't know that. We're not going to have him on anymore. And then 2 days later, they announced it. And I'm like, we're done. We're out.
We're like, we can't work with a guy like this. You understand? And we explained why. This guy's a crazy guy. And by the way, I have to say, let me say this. I don't care if people get mad at me for this. One of the things and I've been in politics a lot longer than the 13 years we've been doing this, and still will be to some extent.
Same.
There are a lot of weird people in politics. I mean, just weird people. And I was always, and look, I know that's judgmental. I know that's terrible, and I shouldn't do that. And it's not my most Christian moment to think that, but there are a lot of weird people, Matt. And I wanted very hard not to end up being one of those weird people. and there are absolutely, I used to do a bit on my original podcast called the Nutball Box, where I talk about where I would document crazy things that were said that were becoming more and more mainstream. That's just conversation on that's just Facebook now. I mean, I could, there's crazy people. There's an enormous amount of untreated mental illness running rampant on the internet and at political meetings. I mean, you go there now, and it was always true to some extent. I mean, we even when I first started getting involved in politics, you'd have the guy come in, talk about the gold standard, or you have the guy who would want to make some presentation about fluoridation or something. But now it's so much.
And I wrote about that in my piece, that you always had audit the Fed types.
You talk about this explicitly. Yeah.
You always had those fringe Birchers and audit the Fed and Ron Paul type people. But now you can't go anywhere without these QAnon losers and these where we go one, we go all, and Pizzagate and Deep State and all these other people who clearly who clearly can't Google anything, can't read the internet. And it's just, they're just force fed this stuff and believe it, which just proves they just don't have the intellectual capacity to engage in serious political conversation. I'm sorry, that's just the God's truth.
And a lot of good, great, wonderful people, mostly, but also some really weird people, man.
Yeah.
It's like, where are just the normal people who have families and want like lower taxes? Where are those people? How can I talk to those people? I want to talk to those people. And you can't, because they've siloed themselves off.
Oh, by the way,
they're watching ESPN all day.
By the way, some of those people run for office. By the way, a lot of them run for office. Under the advice of counsel, I won't say anything further. But
that was the only other time we were asked to take something down. Yes, that's still to be resolved. I'm very much looking forward to when, and I don't know when it'll be. It could be a long, long time. I don't know. When the duck pin gets to roll out that expose. But eventually you will get to finish telling that story. But the crazy people and crazy people who demand to be on that debate stage with the other people who are actually trying to win, and the good people at the local club or the YRs or whoever who are trying to be fair have to waste time. And people like us were the only ones willing to say, hey, Brian Vaith, you don't deserve to be on the same debate stage with these guys running for governor because you're not serious. That's the one criticism I have. And I know, again, I'm going to sound at some effete elitist. I hate unserious people. I do, especially in politics. What we're doing, you can have fun. You can be a personality. You can be quirky. You can be whatever. But my time is too important to deal with people who aren't serious. I don't care if you disagree with me. I don't care if you have a different point of view. I'm not talking about education or what you do for a living, but are you serious? Are you serious about doing what it takes to move forward? If you're not, I ain't got time for it. I don't want to waste my time for you. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Robin Ficker. Robin Ficker is not a serious person, especially when it comes to politics. And it rubs me the wrong way. And people tolerate it to some degree. And I don't know why there aren't more people saying, I mean, we got George McDermott as our Republican nominee for Congress in the district we live in. He's a nut. Okay. Bottom line, point blank. He's a litigious nut. Go to his website, talk to him for 5 minutes. Okay. But hey, nobody better wants to run against him. And then he's run enough times.
Again, an effect of gerrymandering.
And again, so we didn't talk much about that race because
I didn't even vote for any of the candidates in that race. I don't know what you did, Greg, but I didn't vote for any of them.
I voted for somebody else who was less of a nut. I thought, or at least a different nut. But that's something, again, that just wastes so much time and energy from what good, decent people in our party are trying to do. And we need to do something about it. The first thing we need to do is call it out.
Yeah, something we always do.
Call it out. You know what? Maybe the Women's Republican Club doesn't have to have all 10 people who spent $290 to get on the ballot. Maybe they put some criteria in, even though the Scott Colliers of the world might bitch about it. Maybe the YRs don't have to be so giving and have people sit through, 7 candidates, each getting 5 minutes in a debate. We need to do something more about that. Brian had the great idea that other states do, that you have to have some threshold to get on the ballot. I think that's a brilliant idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. If you've ever sat through these people in a debate, you should do that. That kind of thing. And I think even for low-level offices, it doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't have to necessarily be money, but it has to be some threshold that you can do something to get on the ballot.
Or at least pay real money and not like, the price of a flat screen.
Or have to, get 1,000 people to actually say, I'm okay with you running. I'll sign a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the threshold is too low. And we've said that.
And the other thing is, and Sam in our chat talks about it, the party needs to prepare to recruit good candidates, make the preparation, and then the candidates will come, not wait for the candidates to come. And there are a lot of candidates we don't support at all. A lot of races we just write off and just expect people to jump in the deep end. And this is what you get. And this is, and maybe as activists, we need to find a way to do that ourselves. But if you want good candidates, you have to be willing to support. Why would good people get into these races? Why would good people who are serious want to tilt at windmills?
No, I agree. And the people who wind up tilting at windmills are some of the same people Greg just mentioned earlier. And it's just this vicious cycle. One thing I do want to mention, and then we'll talk kind of about the future of conservatism and kind of where we see things going. You mentioned Greg did the first political podcast. We had the first podcast network, and a lot of people followed in that vein. Yeah. One thing that people did not follow in that vein is that we were the first, and probably the only, blog in the world to have an Air Force. Yeah. And we actually did have an Air Force that was bigger than a few countries' Air Forces, and it lasted one day, and nobody spoke of it again, really.
Except for you. You had
except for me.
You had a drone at a convention we were live remote broadcasting from. That was,
and I couldn't fly the damn thing to save my life.
Yeah. No, we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of fun. So now that we've swum deep in angry Lake Me, and I hope you all enjoyed that. And it doesn't really matter if you didn't or not.
We didn't care before. We don't care now.
It's our last show.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Not turn in next week?
You want to be real? This is real. I don't know what else to say. So let's talk about the future. We both wrote about this. So if you want to start, Brian, I'll give you the floor.
Sure. I expressed, look, we've come a long way as a party. Things are a lot better than they used to be. For a long time, Red Maryland was considered the communications arm of the Maryland Republican Party because nobody else was doing it. That was written in like the Baltimore Sun, that we were the de facto communication wing of the party. So a lot of things are in place. Governor Hogan has shown people the framework. And I know a lot of people in the party get their pants in a bunch when we say that. But Larry Hogan has showed you how to win. The question is whether people want to listen to that or not.
Whether
You
they
you don't have to go reinvent the wheel. This is the framework. This is how it's done. And
I have not seen anybody who opposes that who has a better alternative.
I think that's the big thing.
There are too many people who don't want to win. And again, you're not serious if you're not interested in winning.
Yeah, you either want to win, and look, there are people I understand who have serious issues they want to talk about, and they run in hopeless cases. But there are a lot of races where people just piss it away, and races that we basically throw in the towel because the candidates, as you say, Greg, are not serious people. I think there's a lot of promise there. I called out the YRs and just the absolute turnaround the Maryland Young Republicans in the last year. I mean, basically, after I stepped down from as YR chair after my second term in 2015, basically nothing happened for 4 years. It was like there was no chairman at all. And then Maria stepped in and has basically turned the entire ship around. Maria Sophia and Evan Young and Melissa Brown and all those guys, and they've done a hell of a job in doing that. There is a bench. There is a future there. My concern remains what's happening at Pennsylvania Avenue, a national focus. Trump's killing conservatism. Trump's killing the party. I mentioned this in my piece. People who years ago, the same people who would trail Larry Hogan around or ask on Facebook, does Larry Hogan understand the purpose of government? Just clap like heels for whatever Trump does, whether it's conservative or not. And that's the most frustrating aspect of it. Trump's conservative. And that's just the bottom line. He made sure he is not a conservative. And that I got involved was to conservatism, not just the guy who's got the R on his sleeve. If that's what I believe, there are a lot of challengers who beat incumbents that we wouldn't have challenged over, or that we wouldn't have supported over the years. Look, I understand some people like the president's tone. I think it's off-putting. I think it hurts us with the independent voters and the women voters who are kind of swing voters that we need in order to win here. The same voters, once again, Larry Hogan was able to bring over to his side in both elections, quite frankly. Donald Trump on the ballot hurt us, or Donald Trump being president, rather, hurt us in 2018. On down ballot races, races like Steve Shue's race, a couple Senate races, and delegate races. I shudder to think what would have happened if the Democrats had nominated a real candidate in 2018 and not Ben Jealous, because that election would have been a hell of a lot closer than it actually was. I said this in the piece, and I know it's probably controversial, but I say it and I mean it. We can't win the governor's race in 2022 if Donald Trump gets reelected. And I'm sorry to say, I'm willing to make the sacrifice of Donald Trump getting reelected if it means we can win the governor's race in 2022. That's more important to me. And I'm sure somebody's going to be offended by it. I don't care. That's just the way I feel. If Donald Trump loses, which is a very good possibility, and I don't say that out of my dislike of the president and his policies. I say that based on political analysis and my experience as a political scientist and 25 years of watching this stuff. I think you're going to see a reckoning within the party. I think you are going to see things change. If they don't change, then we're all in a lot of trouble anyway. So I am cautiously optimistic that we can right this ship. I think the groundwork is there to bring forth not just Republican victories, but conservative victories in Maryland in the future. I think that redistricting, particularly in the General Assembly, is going to work wonders with that, particularly if we can get single-member districts and give, which will create not just more and better conservative representation, but better African-American representation, Asian-American representation, women representation. There's a lot of positives that we can look at. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of positive we can look at, but there is also a dark hole that we're looking at. And it's kind of like running towards the cliff. It's like Thelma and Louise. Are we going to drive over the cliff, or are we going to hit the brakes before we go? I don't know. So that's a real downer note, Greg. Why don't you bring a little bit more optimism to the party?
I don't know if I'm going to do that. Look, I don't share your passionate dislike of the president. There's plenty of things I've been very skeptical about the president, don't like about the president. I think if he read the teleprompter and stayed off Twitter between now and November, he'd massively increase his chances to win. He's not going to do that.
That I agree.
He can't do that. I think that his administration, especially where he's let others do things, have had some good policy and good effects. Not everywhere. I don't agree with him on trade. I don't agree with him on some other things. But look, I'm not a fan. This is more a historiographical point than a historical point. I don't believe in the great man theory of history. I don't think Donald Trump is the problem. I think Donald Trump is a symptom of the much deeper problems that we have within our politics, and that affects Maryland in a unique way. Look, in 2018, Republican turnout as a percentage was higher than it was in 2014. Donald Trump and that polarization helped that. The problem is that there were more it was up for Democrats as well, because he got Democrats out to the polls, and there were more Democrats who voted in Maryland in 2018 than there are registered Republicans in the state of Maryland.
That too.
Okay. We can't win under that formula, that turnout the base polarization that may or may that got the president elected with, over 50% negatives, which is something that, Lee Atwater 30 years ago would have said was impossible. That won't work in Maryland. It can't. It's just math, folks. And I get frustrated with, as Brian does, the people who just don't want to see math. That doesn't work. There is an alternative model that can work. And the governor has shown that. Having, and I think if we really want to be a governing party that governs in a big way, the party's big enough for both. I think most Republicans get that. Most Republicans understand that. When you look at approval in the state with Republicans, both the president and the governor get over 70% approval, or 70+% approval. Okay. I get that. And the people who hate, I think we overstate that to some degree. I think most people get it. I think Maryland Republicans by and large are much more practical, and have been as long as I've been living it, which is my whole life. I'm a native of the state.
As am I.
Okay. Here's where I'm not so much positive, is that looking into 2022, we got real problems. And I wrote about this. I'm not going to repeat everything. What the governor's pandemic response, his aggressive, unprecedented actions, was a mistake. Point blank. It was a mistake. It wrecked the economy. It destroyed all the jobs he created in the first 5 years of administration 5 times over, and we're still hemorrhaging. Okay. He's moving very quickly, much more quickly than he said he was going to do a month ago, to reopen. And I think the Democrats are now realizing too. Okay. I think every day that goes by, we're going to look back and look at that initial response to COVID was a horrible overreaction and a mistake. It was. And I don't think we're going to get back to the same level of employment that we were in February of 2020 before I hope I'm wrong. I really, really want to be wrong, but I don't think we're going to get there. We can have very quick recovery in a lot of areas because there's a lot of stored up demand. I think we can be growing in the right direction, but it's going to be a negative. This governor, who we have carried tankers full of water for, has hamstrung his legacy with this COVID overreaction. He did. He'll never admit it. People in his administration get mad when I say it. Every day that goes by, that's more and more true. And he's still going too slow to undo it, though he's trying to go, I think, as fast as he can without losing face. You also have this redistricting issue. If the governor, and I went into more detail in my piece, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go into too much. Look, if the governor is successful in redistricting, I think it helps buoy Republican. The more competitive elections we have in November in General Assembly races, the better off Republicans are going to be.
Not just electorally, by the way. Let's also remember that
better government.
Those fact there are so many Democratic safe seats is why the Democrats in the General Assembly can veer as far to the left as they've been.
I think the better off we're going to be. The problem is, and again, it's math. I hate that people don't understand basic math. The governor can propose something, and he can veto what the Democrats want to do. But if the Democrats have the votes within their caucus to pass their own thing, if they can get together and pass a super extreme map made by DNC computers to maximize to squeeze out every bit of juice the way they did in 2010, and that goes over the governor, and that ends up the governor has no legacy at that point.
It's true.
I think people are legitimately going to say, what did we accomplish positively? We had no tax increases for 6 years. It's not enough. And this is what worries me going into an election where somebody's trying to follow him up who's going to face a likely Democratic challenger. And I hate Peter Franchot. I think Peter Franchot being governor would be an absolute disaster. I hate the sycophants around him. I hate his disingenuous moderate stance. I think he'll be a terrible governor. Okay, he's Paris Glendening 2.0. And feel free to quote me on that.
That's a best case scenario.
Okay, he'll be a disaster. But the problem is he can at least plausibly pretend he's moderate. He's kind of cozying up. He's still going out. He can appeal to the far left as well, which he did when the Alabama abortion thing, and he's saying that the police are overreacting to these demonstrations going on right now, and so on and so forth. He'll do that. If he can get by the Democratic primary, he's going to have $10-15 million because the Republicans have never really seriously challenged him and allowed him to amass this thing. And he's going to have so much built-in advantage. And you talk about, well, the national headwinds of Trump, it's not going to matter. Even if Biden's president and people are angry at Biden and it's a good Republican year, you're not going to get Republican turnout much higher than what it was, frankly, in 2018. And the state party has not made voter registration its number one priority. Closing that gap ought to be the number one priority. And I love Dirk. I think Dirk is great. When he was at our conference and we talked about it, he wasn't that worried about it. He saw what happened in 2018 as an anomaly because people didn't like Trump. It won't happen again. It's a systemic problem. And we have very deep divisions within our party. There's going to be Hogan fatigue. There is already Hogan fatigue. 8 years of, if we nominate the lieutenant governor, who's a great guy, who would be a great governor, okay? If he's running to be the third Hogan term, that is going to be really, really tough to pull off. The Hogan coalition is split, and it's not just because of Trump. That exacerbates it. But again, this pandemic overreaction is a big part of it, and people are just fatigued on this whole thing. The governor's going to have a hard time getting this economy back because the Democrats are going to make it more difficult for him. But that's going to be his legacy. I can see Peter Franchot now saying, we've lost jobs over the last 8 years. And the fact is, he doesn't have to do a whole lot. I mean, as bad as what's his face was in 2018, whose name I'm blanking on because I'm getting old, he got more votes than any Democrat who ever ran for governor in the state of Maryland ever.
It's true.
If he had another $15 million and wasn't being called a socialist credibly, he would have won. At least it would have been much, much more competitive.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I love the lieutenant governor, but he ain't the politician that Larry Hogan is. Nobody is, frankly. And I'm just having a hard time being optimistic about this unless the governor can really do some amazing things in the last couple of years. And he's hamstrung himself trying to do it. And all of these things with the negative media environment and the polarization and the nationalization of politics is just going to make it harder for Republicans in this state to break through that noise. Because there's nothing more the Democrats in Maryland would want to have than the voters thinking about national things and voting,
especially if Trump gets reelected.
National stuff.
Yeah. Well,
so I'm not terribly optimistic, and I'm glad I won't be commenting on it for the next few years because,
Well, but you will be commenting on it.
Right.
You will be on WGMD still every Thursday at 6:50. You're on 7:50, excuse me. You will be on Twitter at Gregory Klein. You'll be returning to the practice of law full time, I hear.
I'm not returning. I've always been there. Thank you.
Yes, I know.
By the way, God, somebody pick up the mantle, and there should be another Red Maryland. There's no reason why that can't happen. There's no reason in the world that we can't have a conservative funded alternative to Maryland Matters.
There should
the money's there, the talent's there. It's the lack of leadership trying to put it together. And Brian and I can't do it all ourselves. We've been preaching about this for years, and I guess nobody's listening. Oh, wait a minute. Last second. I hope we're not leaving in 10 minutes.
What?
We have a very special last second guest.
Do we have a guest?
We do. Hello?
Hot dog.
Caller, are you there?
This is great.
This is
Mark Nugent's there.
Hi, Mark.
But he's a blue screen.
Maybe this is okay.
We couldn't get through the last show without Greg having to say, I love technology.
I don't think here he is.
Are you there?
He's come to say and everything. It's great. Hold on, Mark. There he is. Oh, I saw him. I saw you. What is going on?
Hey,
what's that?
Mark,
hey,
my man.
Hey, you need a haircut, dude.
Quarantine cut, man. And haven't had a chance to get that
to pay the internet bill. Yes.
I told my wife she's got another week to enjoy. What are you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Great. You missed all the effusive praise we had for you earlier.
Well, you might have missed that. Yeah.
Well, I'll go back and watch it. Sorry, it's been a hectic few weeks and months, and but I'm glad to join you.
Can't imagine why.
What's nothing? Yeah, not going on.
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, I came back. I got back to the second floor, and
oh boy. I love technology. By the way, by the way, I just love that screen. Oh, there you go. You're back.
Can't hear you,
Mark. Wow, on the few precious minutes.
Well, I see you guys have solved all your technical problems.
This is on you, buddy. This is on you.
It's all our fault. Tell us a little bit. I mean, we can't tell the story of that. I'm so glad you
come back in. How about that?
Okay. All right. Well, it's working now. But okay.
That's what she said.
All right. Okay. This is so great. This is such a perfect ending. Oh, now he's on a different feed. Let's try this.
Okay.
Let's do this now.
That better?
That is so much. But now there's two of you. Oh, there we go. Okay. Perfect. Yes, that's better.
I don't know if you guys could hear me, but I heard it sounds like it looks like you guys have solved all the technical issues.
Yeah, this is on you, buddy.
Again, it wasn't our end. It's the point that we were making. You probably missed that
the
part.
Jingle, Greg.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes, I love technology.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So how are you doing, man? How's life treating you?
I see Greg, but I don't see Brian.
Okay, that's fine. It's not worth saying.
You're missing the money maker.
While I try to adjust things technically, tell us
whatever Greg's saying. It sounds very profound.
I missed that sarcasm. And now he's gone. Are you kidding me?
Use the computer, dude.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I can't.
Wired internet connection. We learned this last week.
Okay, it's okay.
Don't use the Wi-Fi.
He's coming back.
Okay, take 4.
Mark, before we lose you forever, tell us anything you want to say about your remembrances of Red Maryland, your thoughts on Red Maryland, love, hate, whatever you got.
Well, I want to say I enjoyed both of your pieces, Greg and Brian. I thought they were both well written, moving, and it was huh?
Sorry, I can't help being snarky. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic. I'm trying to be nice.
Why start now?
That's fine. Greg, yours. I admit, Greg, yours was less flamethrower, but hey. No, I just want to say it was, what we did and what you guys continue to do after I left was, you made a mark, and you filled a void that was there. We saw it, and I thought we shook the world for what it's worth at that point in time, and Red Maryland's accomplished great things. I had a conversation with another uh, uh, sometime during the summer with another person that does another political blog in the state, and they commented about and it was from, they were from the left, but they said they commented on what Red Maryland had accomplished and what it was done, and there's a certain reputation there, and it was well deserved, and I was proud to be a part of that, and sad to see it go, but I understand the reasons why you guys did that, and I can't say I disagree with it. So
Well, that's right. We couldn't have done it without you. I mean, as I
Absolutely.
mentioned earlier in the show, we stand on your shoulders and
no,
everybody else who contributed to this.
it was a team effort, and I really appreciate everything you guys have said over the last few days, and when you guys made the announcement, and was proud to be a part of it, and glad to see what you guys did even after I left. So and you know what, just very proud. That's all I can say.
Well, I'm glad you came on. I was worried we weren't going to be able to have you on, and it wouldn't be right to do this without talking to you. So I'm glad.
No, I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I'm glad I could make it on. I just it's between commuting back to Annapolis and everything going on down here family wise and everything else, it's a bit hectic, but I wanted to make sure I did carve out some time and be able to say farewell and thanks, and bon chance, as they say across the pond.
Bon chance.
Bon chance.
So now I have to leave on a snarky question. Do they love us or hate us on the second floor since you've been there?
So when I said, Red Maryland's quitting, they're like, who? So
That's fair. That's fair.
There's certain appreciation for what you guys have done. So yeah.
I that's fine.
Yeah.
That's not the worst answer, by the way.
No, definitely not.
No. It's like, yeah, it's I will say this, transferring from what I was doing with Red Maryland to, we all both knew a lot about we knew a lot about state politics and state government process.
Right.
But I can say from my time, it's a completely different animal when you're in the middle of it. And it's one thing to know the process, how the budget works or how a policy process works or an operations process works. But it really, when they talk about Annapolis and relationships and people, that's been the biggest lesson to learn is Annapolis does run on, when they say it runs on relationships, it absolutely does.
Yeah. And I think that, and a lot of people inside the party, outside the party, don't understand that. And it's something that we've touched on over the years about there being a lot of relationships that go on here, whether it's a primary election, whether it's somebody endorsing somebody or not. And yeah, I mean, I don't think people, because our side has so little experience in the actual sausage making, that it's just gets completely lost how much actually goes into changing a policy. And I'm not talking about the people who think that the governor should just suspend this law forever, right now. I mean, there's a lot of those people who are out there, but it's not like, it's not like the governor with the stroke of a pen just does something and it changes. You've got to workshop that policy. You have to implement that policy, and people just don't necessarily understand that, I don't think.
Well, they say politics is the art of the possible, right?
Oh, screw that. We're going long.
It's the art of politics is the art of the possible. And it's you guys have seen it, and I've seen it too, where it's like, why doesn't the governor just do this? Like you said, except we can't. There's rules. Right. There's a constitution. There's separation of powers. There's, it's like the governor just can't wave a wand and taxes reduced to the lowest marginal rate that somebody wants. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So
60 seconds.
Ignore it.
That's
your favorite blog.
She's still there, huh?
She's still
there. Well,
we're too lazy to figure out a better way of doing things. I think the duckpen.com will figure all that out.
There you go.
We will not be on Blog Talk Radio once we start podcasting. I will assure you of that.
At least someone listened to me about Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah, only 8 years after the fact.
Honestly, let's pull behind the curtain. We actually did look into it at one point.
The curtain's down.
Yeah, we at least looked into it at some juncture, and then we realized how much of a pain it was going to be. We'd have to switch the feed. We have to do this and do that, and it's like it's not really worth it to change it. So
the question I have about the curtain is now, Brian, are you going to light it on fire?
Who said it's not burning behind me as it is?
10 seconds.
Oh, shut up, woman.
Way to start the duck pin, bro.
What did you expect? What did you expect? I mean, as I've said before, the world deserves the unvarnished, unlimited Brian Griffiths. It deserves it. And in this day and time, it this or a meteor, it deserves it all.
And that, by the way, will be the duckpin.com, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the duckpin. We're also on YouTube as well. By the way, one of the things that we mentioned earlier was at the Red Maryland Leadership Conference, the rights and organizing for that would be retained with me, and I can do with it what I want. Stay tuned, everybody. Keep an eye out on that.
Yeah.
Something's coming.
All those crazy rights have been transferred to you.
Yeah.
You can absolutely put a conference on.
So monetized. We haven't had you on for so long, but is there a particular moment that you remember the most fondly, Mark? That
I would say the show we did at Union Jacks, but I don't remember much of that.
Yeah, you don't remember much of that at all, do you?
We recorded it, yeah.
No, I thought it was like, I think when we were with the Sun, I think the things we were able to do there and the messages we were able to send out there, and we threw a few high and tights and blowback pitches, so that I just think the fact is that we blazed a trail. We were pioneers, and there were a lot of people behind us that kind of came through that. So I think that's, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. There's people doing blogs and podcasts now, and that's a space we helped create. So
yeah, absolutely.
Very true. Very true.
And I think too, I'd be remiss that, Larry Hogan.
Yeah. I mean, we were there that night on election night.
Yeah.
And I'll never remember Joe Cluster high-fiving everybody in sight when he kind of got the numbers in and realized that it was actually going to happen. And I think all of us kind of looked around. It was like, yeah, we thought this was going to happen, but it's like, oh, it's actually happening, and we're here in a very small part of it at the time. You, of course, became a bigger part of it moving into the administration, but just to be, even like I said, on the outside of that, looking in, and it was just surreal to be in that room when he said he took the concession call from Anthony Brown. I don't think I've ever been in a room as loud as that room that night.
And an interesting sort of coda to that was, we were there together in 2018, and
right.
2014 we had to wait a little while. 2018 it was boom like that. I mean, well, Linda Lamone notwithstanding.
Yeah, I was going to say they had to work those
it did the decision that was called so fast, and just to have that, it was almost like, wow.
Well, yeah, it was kind of surreal, especially when then you look at, we have a 2-term governor, and then everything ancillary going on around it, where basically everything around the, except for the governor's race, basically started to slowly collapse. I was looking over, talking to somebody at like 10:30 that night, and it was the first time I saw that like Steve Shue was losing, and it's like, wait a minute, if Steve Shue is losing, there's something happened, and it's not going to be a good night overall for us. And I don't think I think it took till 10 o'clock again, because we had to wait on election returns till people kind of even knew that was even a possibility, that there was going to be that much carnage on our side of the aisle.
Yeah, it was just, from my perspective, I didn't like that, but it was just sort of, I was thinking back to 2014 that night, how fast the decision came and the results came in and the win came in, and it was just like, the sort of moments in history, and they come so fast. And to me, it feels just like yesterday we were at the Westin in 2014, that night in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like it was, and all of a sudden now, it's 6 years later, and we're coming into the last 2 years of a second term. And it's just into what you guys wrote about in your pieces about where we came from, in 2007 and 2010 to, and it really wasn't that, it felt like a long time, but it really wasn't. And here we are 13 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and in 2014, 2018, both historic moment. I mean, really historic moments, things that literally people thought could not happen, happened. I mean, and in each one in their own rights, equally extraordinary.
Yeah.
The governor getting reelected in 2018 by the margin he did in the environment that he did is just an astounding political accomplishment.
Yeah, it's
That if you told the 2007 Red Maryland guys that was going to happen, we could have even imagined that.
Yeah, we would have laughed you out of the room. It's like, that's good optimism, but come on, not that quickly.
Yeah. That's the interesting sort of historical project to go to sort of look back at that and say, yeah, you would have been crazy. Tell us that in 2007, 2008. We're like, okay, you're crazy. Remember Bob Ehrlich saying there's never be another Republican governor, and that was the conventional wisdom. And Larry Hogan comes along and turns it on its ear.
Yeah. Well, some of us saw it coming, but
you're right. Great. You did it. But we go back to the sun.
And the sun, and I think we said earlier in the show, the sun was the zenith of the ideal that we had as Red Maryland. And you read what we wrote. You've been in the administration for a while. I'm sure you see it as too. The world that Red Maryland was born into, the environment that Red Maryland was born into, it doesn't exist. I mean,
I agree.
You got out at a good time.
Oh, I think you're right. It's. I hate to use the word relic, but that's almost what it is.
It is.
It's not the. Greg, you wrote really well about this. Is that the old long form blog post? We used to write magnum opus blog posts. We used to. Remember, we had to put the HTML jump in, right? To remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't do that. Nobody does that. Who does that anymore?
And you know what people did? People went to the blog and read them.
Yes. And
they didn't just go on social media and read the title.
Yeah.
They actually went there and read these things.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad they did, because we put a lot of time and effort.
We sure did.
Yeah, a lot of time, effort.
For you.
Yeah. That's right. It's good. Greg, I got to say, it was good to see you start writing again.
That's fine. I'll take that. But I know how much work I put into it and what the reward is. So it wasn't. I always loved the podcast side. And so now, since we're doing this, I still remember, and I will take to my dying day, your buddy, the former senator, who you would relish relating to us, saying, I never listened to their podcast. I read their blog. And then Senator Madden. And then he came up to a live event we were doing and said it to our faces.
Oh, Marty.
And I got to tell you, that was a watershed moment for me as the general manager of the podcast network, to have the senator come and say, I don't listen to any of your podcasts.
It's Marty. Marty, he's kind of got he's like he was one of the wise men up there, as a guy that he parted a lot of wisdom. So say that about Marty. So,
well, he missed out because we have nearly 1,900 podcasts, and many of which you were involved in, and an incredible amount of wonderful programming that we put out there that a lot of people did listen.
Yes. Never forget doing an episode of The Broadside with Andrew Langer at Andrew's house when the plumber showed up, and I was in the midst of a wonderful stem winder against Mike Miller, and Andrew decides, well, let's talk to the plumber.
Yeah. Well, and he's on the radio now. So what is that?
There you go.
So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
You want to talk about the bad incentives in the media environment? There you go.
There it is right there. Yeah. Lots of good stories. Lots of good times.
We've made it now almost 2 hours and 10 minutes into the show, and we didn't even talk about Mike Miller saying that we're from the gates of hell.
From down below, yeah.
Down below.
Well,
I mean,
so funny story about that is the day after that happened, I get on the elevator, and there he is. And he is one of the nicest people you will ever meet. I swear. We had our beefs with him, we had our disagreements with him, but you can't deny his his body of work as a politician and a tactician, and but I gotta say, he was one of the nicest people I've ever met in Annapolis. Always had a kind word to say to you, as did Mike Bush. And that's what I talked about when it goes back to the relationships. There are people that they'd fight like cats and dogs in committee or on the floor, but a lot of times it didn't carry over, and that was striking to me.
You know, there was one moment, one chapter, which we needn't dwell into too far, where we were on the same side as Mike Miller, and that was very uncomfortable week. But he was very gracious in being supportive of us during that week, as I recall.
Yes.
I'm not asking for a comment. I'm just making a point.
Yeah, again, we didn't make it this far and didn't talk about 53,000 signatures to save the flag, by the way. Which again was one of those silly ideas that I had like at an airport delay and put up this petition at 2:00 in the morning, and a week later I'm on Channel 9 and it's all over the news, and you know everybody's got to make comments about it. We even had Eric Ludke troll us with his own petition. I think got like 6 signatures on it.
And we still have not only the state flag, we still have the same state song.
Funny that, yeah. All this time.
That's an amazing accomplishment, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I mean, just think about too the world that sort of after tonight, there's going to be you're going to have redistricting coming up and all these big events, and it's a different world, Yeah.
Yes, it will. But it'll keep rolling. That's the other thing. We've been doing this long enough that we know there's always going to be something else.
And as Greg pointed out, and I wrote this in my piece too, I hope somebody comes out of the ether to do this. Nice. Unfortunately, I mean, you would have thought by now, so many people don't like us, that there would have been some sort of person to be a competitor to us, or somebody would try to outdo us from the right. And there just hasn't been the interest there. And I know there's no funding for it. I know I've talked to at least one person who's talked about, who's talked about doing something similar, but didn't actually want to compete against us. And now that we're leaving that space, maybe they will. We did have a couple people reach out and asked, hey, what do you guys want to take over the brand? And I said, it's not necessarily for sale, but if you want to talk about it, that check better have a lot of zeros in it. And we didn't hear back from that guy. So,
but there's your chance to finally get paid, guys.
Yeah, but it was like
we value this. I mean,
I know. I'm just
we really do value this. You were, even when you were gone, and we always viewed you as just being on sabbatical. But even when you were gone, I mean, we felt like trustees of this thing. We still do. And I wrote in my piece, I take some comfort in the fact that we can preserve the legacy of Red Maryland forever.
Yeah. And as we pointed out earlier, we are going out on top. No matter what anybody says, and I know there are people who are putting the coffin in the coffin that is Red Maryland. Idiots. We are going out, near record high readership, record high ratings for the podcast. And, there is an audience to keep doing this, but at some point it's just the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Well, I got to run, but
yes,
guys,
we all do.
Yeah, guys, we all do.
Just great job. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Greg, let's start rolling the song.
And Brian, good luck with the duck pin. I'll be reading. Greg, good luck, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
God bless. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
All
Mark.
right, guys. Bye.
Yeah, let's start putting a bow on this.
All right.
And now
really loud.
The end is near.
Is that better?
It is better.
Okay.
I think everybody knows what this song is, obviously. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud of. Is the
fact not related to a wrestler. This is the thing.
It's not related to a wrestler. You got to turn up a little bit. Now I can't hear. I know. I'm
gonna miss this.
Yeah, right. Is people told us we had to do things a certain way if we were going to be taken seriously, and I certainly wasn't having any of it. Greg didn't have any of it, and we were who we were, and we are who we are until the end.
You had a little work up there. You talk up. You didn't quite hit them.
Oh, sorry.
Regret.
All right, final word.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you to you, Greg. I mean, we did 460 odd some of these, almost together in some capacity. Thank you to everybody who read. Thank you to all 61 of our contributors. If you ever read us, shared us, emailed us, loved us, or hate us, you had a part of this too. And we thank you. We salute you. I will see you at the duckpin.com and in my capital column. I'll still be around. I'm not walking away from the battle space, okay? I'm still part of the movement, and I'm still here. But this, Red Maryland, it's time for it to retire. Greg, any final thoughts?
It's been great. It's been a great 13 years. We did a lot. Was it worth it? That's up now to time to decide. I hope that all of you listening who appreciated what we did will do us the great favor of maybe confronting some of the people who complain about it. That would be the greatest thing you could do for me. I'll still be around. I'm going to decompress some. I share with Brian. We have a great piece going up tomorrow. Thanking everybody.
It's already up. I screwed up and it's already posted.
It's fine. It's great. It's a great piece. Go look at it now. I'm glad we both had a chance to speak our piece in our final blog entries, and I hope everybody takes the time to read it. I mean, there's a lot there. It was an honor. It was a privilege. It didn't happen without a cost. But unlike my running for state party chair, I don't regret it for a second. And I think I take a great deal of satisfaction in being able to close this chapter satisfied that we can preserve a fantastic legacy for all time. And I've made a lot of great friends. Thursday nights won't be the same without you, buddy.
No, same here. I think my wife's a little happy. My Thursdays are free now, but you're right. This was as fun. This was informative, and it was cathartic sometimes too. Nice having this opportunity to get together and chat, not just with you, but with you all for all of those years. So for everybody here who's ever written here, everybody here who's ever listened, ever done a podcast here, thank you. We salute you. For everybody here at the network, thank you very much. For Greg Klein, I am Brian Griffiths, and you have been listening to Red Maryland Radio on the Red Maryland Network.